Emergency broadcasts crackled across 17 star systems. The Altarian Defense Council's urgent transmission cut through hyperspace static. Vex Thanor has broken through our outer defenses. Repeat, the Empire's champion approaches the core worlds. On Kepler Prime, military commanders evacuated entire cities. The Zephyrian High Command issued immediate surrender protocols to all civilian populations. Panic spread like wildfire through the galactic networks as species after species reported the same terrifying news. The Empire's ultimate weapon was moving through their territory, leaving nothing but conquered worlds in its wake. Vex Thanor. Even the name sent shivers through hardened veterans who had survived the Clone Wars and the Synthetic Uprising. For 3,000 standard years, this singular being had carved a path of absolute victory across the known galaxy. No army had slowed them. No strategy had confused them. No weapon had wounded them. The warrior stood 8 feet tall, encased in living chitinous armor that adapted to any environment. For powerful arms wielded weapons that could slice through battleship hulls like paper. Glowing crimson eyes saw through every deception, every trap, every desperate last stand that terrified civilizations threw against them. The numbers told the story that military analysts refused to believe. 10,000 battles, 10,000 victories, 57 star systems brought under Empire control by a single individual. Entire species had evolved new instincts just to recognize the approach of Vex Thanor's distinctive ship signatures. The Crystalline Collective had developed technology specifically to detect the warrior's energy blade from 3 light years away, giving them enough time to prepare surrender documents. The Silicon Brotherhood maintained a permanent diplomatic channel to the Empire, hoping that immediate capitulation might spare them the humiliation of facing their greatest champion in person. What made Vex Thanor truly terrifying wasn't just their combat prowess, it was their intelligence. The warrior combined the tactical genius of history's greatest generals with reflexes that operated beyond the speed of thought. They studied each species before conquest, learning psychological weaknesses, cultural blind spots, and technological limitations. By the time Vex Thanor arrived at a world, they already knew exactly how that civilization would fall. The warrior had become the Empire's perfect instrument of expansion, a living weapon that transformed resistance into submission through the sheer weight of inevitable defeat. The Empire's strategists had refined their approach over millennia. Why waste fleets and resources on stubborn worlds when a single champion could accomplish the same result? Vex Thanor's reputation preceded them like a psychological weapon, breaking enemy morale before the first shot was fired. Commanders surrendered rather than watch their soldiers die pointlessly. Planetary governors negotiated terms rather than witness their cities burn. The warrior had become more valuable than entire armadas, a force multiplier that turned conquest into bureaucracy. Now intelligence reports filter through Empire command about a small blue world in an insignificant spiral arm. The humans of Earth had rejected standard surrender terms. Their primitive technology suggested they posed no real threat, yet they continued to resist diplomatic pressure. Local Empire governors requested immediate intervention before this defiance could spread to other primitive species. Vex Thanor personally volunteered for the assignment, curious about any species bold enough to challenge the Empire's authority. The warrior had fought energy beings, hive minds, and machine intelligences. These carbon-based bipeds would provide an interesting diversion. The hyperspace jump to the Sol system took mere hours. Vex Thanor's ship dropped into normal space near the 3rd planet, immediately detecting the scrambling defense fleets. Human vessels moved with desperate urgency, clearly unprepared for this level of threat. The warrior's scanners analyzed their weapons, armor, and tactical formations. Primitive fusion drives, chemical explosive warheads, electromagnetic barriers that wouldn't stop a training blade. This would be over quickly. The standard ultimatum broadcast on all frequencies: surrender within 1 standard day or face the consequences. Vex Thanor watched human communication networks light up with panic and confusion. World leaders convened emergency sessions. Military commanders calculated impossible odds. News broadcasts showed terrified populations fleeing major cities. The familiar pattern was unfolding exactly as it had on thousands of other worlds. Soon, representatives would arrive with surrender documents, and another species would join the Empire's vast collection of subject races. The landing site near New Geneva buzzed with activity as human vehicles surrounded the area in careful formation. Vexthanor emerged from their ship, weapons visible and armor gleaming under Earth's yellow sun. The warrior expected the usual scene: trembling officials clutching surrender documents, military forces maintaining respectful distance, perhaps a few desperate attempts at bribery or negotiation. Instead, they found something unprecedented: humans setting up tables with refreshments and what appeared to be comfortable seating arrangements. Dr. Sarah Chun stepped forward from the human delegation, her expression curious rather than terrified. She carried no weapons, showed no signs of fear, and most confusing of all, seemed genuinely interested in studying Vexthanor's appearance. "Welcome to Earth," she said, gesturing toward the prepared area. "We've arranged a meeting space where we can talk comfortably. Would you prefer to sit or stand during our discussion? We weren't sure about your species' physical preferences." The warrior paused, momentarily thrown off balance. Where was the immediate surrender? The desperate pleas for mercy? The terrified scrambling of inferior beings faced with their obvious superior? Instead, these humans offered hospitality and asked about comfort preferences. Vexthanor had conquered species with technology centuries ahead of these primitives. Yet none had ever asked if they needed anything for their physical well-being during surrender negotiations. "I am Vexthanor, champion of the Galactic Empire," the warrior announced, injecting their voice with the authority that had broken countless civilizations. "You will submit to imperial rule or face the consequences of resistance." The standard declaration that had preceded 10,000 victories echoed across the assembled humans. Vexthanor waited for the expected collapse of morale, the hurried consultations, the inevitable acceptance of defeat. Dr. Chin nodded thoughtfully and pulled out what appeared to be a recording device. "That's fascinating. How long have you held this position? What was your homeworld like before you joined the Empire? We're particularly interested in learning about different cultural perspectives on conflict resolution." She paused, consulting notes on a tablet. "Our preliminary observations suggest you've been isolated from normal social interaction for extended periods. That must be incredibly difficult psychologically." The warriors certainly wavered. No species had ever responded to conquest threats by expressing concern for the conqueror's mental health. Vexthanor found themselves answering questions instead of receiving surrender terms. They described their homeworld, their training, their rise through Empire ranks, all while humans took careful notes and asked follow-up questions with genuine curiosity. Dr. Chen's team asked about Empire culture, technological achievements, and the philosophical foundations of their expansion policy. "You've accomplished remarkable things," Dr. Chen observed, "but I can't help noticing that you seem very alone in all of this. When did you last have a conversation that wasn't about conquest or military strategy? When did someone last ask about your personal interests or goals beyond your role as a weapon?" The questions hit harder than any physical attack Vexthanor had ever endured. The warrior realized that in 3 millennia of perfect victories, no one had ever treated them as an individual rather than an instrument. Enemies saw only a threat to be feared. Empire commanders saw only a tool to be deployed. But these humans seemed to recognize something deeper: a person trapped within the weapon's reputation. Hours passed in unprecedented dialogue. Humans shared stories of their own conflicts and how they had learned to resolve differences without destruction. They spoke of rehabilitation, redemption, and the possibility that even the most hardened warriors could find new purposes. Dr. Chun described human concepts of chosen family, belonging, and finding identity beyond one's original programming or conditioning. The rigid certainty that had driven Vexthanor for thousands of years began to develop hairline cracks. These humans possessed something the warrior had never encountered: the ability to see past the surface to the individual underneath. They offered understanding instead of submission, curiosity instead of fear, and most dangerously of all, hope that there might be more to existence than endless conquest. For the first time in memory, Vexthanor found themselves questioning not just tactics or strategy, but the fundamental purpose that had defined their entire existence. Days blurred together as Vexthanor experienced something entirely foreign: genuine companionship. Dr. Chun introduced the warrior to human customs that had no equivalent in Empire culture. Shared meals where conversation mattered more than hierarchy. Music that stirred emotions the warrior had forgotten they possessed. Art that expressed beauty without purpose or conquest. Stories of individuals who had overcome their darkest moments through connection and understanding rather than domination and force. The warrior found themselves drawn into discussions about human history, learning how this species had evolved from tribal conflicts to global cooperation. Dr. Chen shared her own journey from a childhood marked by loss to becoming Earth's leading xenobiologist. She spoke of finding family among colleagues, of discovering purpose in understanding rather than controlling, of the profound satisfaction that came from helping others heal from trauma. Vexthanor recognized something painfully familiar in her stories: the search for belonging that had driven them through countless battles. Empire commands, urgent transmissions grew increasingly demanding. Status report required immediately. Earth conquest timeline unacceptable. Explain delays. Each message reminded Vexthanor of their duty, their purpose, their identity as the Empire's perfect weapon. Yet when they looked at the humans who had welcomed them with such unexpected warmth, the thought of destroying this remarkable civilization felt like tearing apart their own newfound sense of self. The internal conflict reached a breaking point when Dr. Chun found Vexthanor alone in the garden behind the meeting facility, staring at Earth's strange dual moons. The warrior's posture spoke of profound emotional turmoil, shoulders tense, hands clenched, the weight of an impossible choice pressing down like gravity from a dying star. They had spent 3,000 years following orders without question, defining themselves entirely through conquest and victory. Now they faced a decision that would determine not just Earth's fate, but their own identity. "You're in pain," Dr. Chen observed, approaching with the careful consideration she might show a wounded animal. "I can see the war happening inside you. Whatever you're struggling with, you don't have to face it alone." She sat beside the warrior on a stone bench, close enough to offer comfort, but far enough to respect their space. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit that the path we've been following isn't taking us where we need to go. Vexthanor turned to face this remarkable human who had shown them kindness without expecting anything in return. "I have brought death to thousands of worlds. I am the Empire's instrument of conquest. That is all I have ever been. That is all I know how to be." The words carried the weight of millennia of conditioning, of an identity built entirely around destruction and dominance. Without hesitation, without calculation or strategy, Dr. Chun reached out and gently kissed Vexthanor's forehead. The gesture was soft, platonic, filled with pure acceptance and compassion. It lasted only seconds, but in that brief contact, the warrior experienced something that shattered every defense they had ever built. Unconditional love, complete acceptance, recognition of their worth as an individual rather than as a weapon. The understanding that they deserve care simply for existing, not for what they could accomplish or destroy. The kiss broke through 3,000 years of emotional isolation like sunlight piercing storm clouds. Vexthanor felt their carefully constructed identity crumble and rebuild in an instant. The Empire had taught them that strength meant standing alone, that connection was weakness, that love was a vulnerability to be exploited. But this simple human gesture proved that the opposite was true, that being seen, accepted, and cared for was the most powerful force in the universe. Tears fell from glowing crimson eyes for the first time in memory. The galaxy's most feared warrior wept not from pain or defeat, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being home. "I surrender," Vexthanor whispered, the words carrying weight beyond military capitulation. "Not to your weapons or your armies, but to this, to what you've shown me, to the possibility that I could be something more than what I was made to be." Empire Command's reaction to Vexthanor's final transmission defied all strategic projections. Mission parameters fundamentally altered, unable to proceed with conquest, requesting immediate reassignment to Diplomatic Research Division. Military analysts replayed the message countless times, searching for hidden codes or coercion indicators. Their greatest weapon had just declared Earth unconquerable not through superior firepower, but through something their databases couldn't quantify: human emotional engagement. Admiral Krell, the Empire's chief strategist, convened emergency sessions with the High Council. Our champion reports defeat by advanced psychological warfare techniques involving what they term genuine care. Intelligence suggests the humans have weaponized empathy itself. We cannot comprehend how affection could neutralize our most effective agent. The Empire's vast military machine suddenly faced an enemy that operated by rules no computer simulation had ever considered. News of the impossible defeat spread through underground resistance networks across the galaxy. The Centauri Liberation Front broadcast coded messages: "The undefeated has chosen love over conquest. If Vex Thanor can break free from conditioning, perhaps we all can." Conquered species began questioning the propaganda that had convinced them resistance was futile. If humans could transform the Empire's ultimate weapon through compassion, what other supposedly absolute truths might be challenged? Earth became a sanctuary for something unprecedented in galactic history: a reformed Imperial champion. Vex Thanor formally requested asylum, trading military secrets for the chance to discover who they could become beyond their weapon status. Dr. Chun helped establish integration protocols, teaching the former warrior concepts that had no equivalent in Empire culture. Personal hobbies, emotional expression, the simple pleasure of existing without purpose beyond one's own happiness. The transformation astounded both species. Vex Thanor learned to appreciate human art, finding unexpected beauty in paintings that served no tactical function. They discovered cooking, delighting in the alchemy of combining flavors for pure enjoyment rather than nutritional efficiency. Most remarkably, they began sharing stories of conquered worlds not as military victories, but as tragedies of lost potential and cultural destruction. The warriors' guilt became a driving force for preventing future conflicts. Human diplomatic missions received requests from species across the galaxy seeking to understand these revolutionary tactics. The Zephyrian Council invited Earth ambassadors to teach nonviolent conversion techniques. The Silicon Brotherhood established cultural exchange programs, hoping to learn human methods of enemy rehabilitation. Universities on dozens of worlds added human emotional intelligence to their xenobiology curricula. Vex Thanor's autobiography, From Weapon to Whole, became the most translated document in galactic history. Former enemies read about the warrior's journey from isolation to belonging, finding hope for their own healing from imperial conditioning. The book's central message resonated across species barriers. That connection was not weakness, but the foundation of true strength. That understanding could accomplish what force could not, that even the most damaged individuals could choose redemption. The Empire's expansion slowed dramatically as more champions questioned their programming. Recruitment centers faced unexpected challenges when potential warriors asked about alternatives to conquest careers. The concept of defeating through kindness evolved from galactic curiosity to strategic doctrine adopted by resistance movements everywhere. Earth's defense strategy revolutionized interstellar conflict resolution. Instead of building bigger weapons, humans developed more sophisticated cultural understanding programs. They trained diplomats in species-specific empathy techniques, created rehabilitation centers for former Imperial agents, and established the first galactic university dedicated to peaceful conflict resolution. Vex Thanor served as both professor and living proof that transformation was possible. The former champion found purpose in preventing the wars they had once caused. Their intimate knowledge of Imperial psychology helped develop intervention strategies that saved countless worlds from conquest. They became living evidence that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or military might, but the courage to see enemies as individuals capable of change and worthy of love. The galaxy's most feared warrior had discovered something more powerful than any blade: the profound satisfaction of healing rather than harming, of building rather than destroying, of belonging rather than conquering. One human kiss had accomplished what entire armadas could not, proving that sometimes the gentlest touch could move the mightiest heart.